fish dip. One of the reasons why I made this dip tonight for you guys to taste and to share is to raise the awareness of our invasive species and what sustainable seafood is to me. So I smoked this ta'ape. I bought it from Tamashiro Market. It was caught on Oahu, and I smoked it with pecan wood, did a brine on it, and did a dry rub with paprika, salt, pepper, onion. One version is just plain, and you can eat it with crackers, or the other version is stuffed with some peppers if you want a little bit of spice. So feel free to get up and have some more because I want it gone. I don't want to take home leftovers tonight. So feel free to help yourself. Like I said, tau is one of the invasive species. So for me, I love sharing food and I enjoy cooking too. And so for me to share something that makes people feel good is something that I enjoy doing. And part of my role at Conservation International Hawaii program is working with a variety of partners to talk about issues like how do we eat sustainably and how do we ensure we have fish for the future. And so I'll be talking about that tonight. So I wanted to start off by introducing my team at Conservation International. There's a few of them in the room tonight. There's Eva, Maddie, and Matt outside with all of his kids, and we're all part of the Conservation International team. And our work is statewide. Our projects work statewide, and we're based both here on Oahu. Actually, our office is couple minutes away in the Coco Marina Shopping Center and on Hawaii Island as well. And our mission is to restore our ocean abundance to make sure that we have fish for future generations. And we do that in a multitude of ways. Oops. So our nonprofit organization works to restore ocean health in Hawaii. We do this in 4 different ways. Advancing the place-based solutions, so communities across the state, especially in coastal communities, to help empower them to really take hold of the natural resources and to be able to monitor and measure the health of their own resources. Empowering ocean leaders. So we're investing in the next generation of ocean leaders. We believe that giving people experience in the real world helps to cultivate next generation to really help advocate for our oceans. Transforming policy and conservation finance. We work with policymakers and different community leaders across the state to really find these ocean solutions that better create win-win solutions for our communities, our fisheries, and our communities across the state. And lastly, innovating market-based solutions. So this is kind of the space tonight. And we realize that sustainable seafood's novel, and there needs to be different ways to approaching ocean from a traditional way of closing off different parts of an ocean, and we're using the market to help educate people about the choices that we make every day to eat. And our work in Hawaii feeds a global network of 30 countries around the world. CI is a global organization. Hawaii's actually the base field site. So we have projects ranging from climate change to food security to forests, freshwater security, global stability, and oceans all around the world. And it's been really great to work in Hawaii and see how our work ties into all the other initiatives that CI has worked in globally. And for me, it's inspiring to work with a network. Sometimes when you work local with communities, you don't really see the global impact, when you understand and you get to learn what people in Colombia are doing to help their fisheries, and Brazil and New Zealand. It helps create a culture of knowledge sharing and also just being able to connect our work more broadly. So CI is a large nonprofit organization. So I wanted to kind of start off by sharing a personal story. And one of the reasons why I'm here today is because of my dad, and he's an artist. He actually painted this piece. It's a watercolor and acrylic piece when I was a kid. And if you can kind of tell on the right-hand side, the place that this is at is in Honolulu Fish Pond on the east side of Oahu. And we know the people who own this fish pond, and one of the things that benefits this ecosystem is to fish out the predator fish. So one of them is the barracuda that eats on the native ama or the native mullet. And he was fishing when I was a little kid. Apparently, when the barracuda bit the line, it was just screaming all across the pond, and he almost dropped me in his arms. So one of my first memories growing up is just seeing his artwork and just being not to kind of the stories around fishing that my dad grew up and how he brought me up. And you can see at the top, my little toes are up there and his toes. So when we talk about fishing for future generations, it's very much how I was brought up, and it's why I'm inspired to do the work that I do today. And I think relating to fish generations, one of the things that he instilled in me is really knowing where your food comes from. And for me, that's an important thing to know, because you know how fresh the fisherman was, and why that's for fishing, you always know where your fish comes from because you catch it yourself. You know what area it is, and the health of that ecosystem definitely plays into the health of the fish that you're eating. He also taught me how a lot of times we'll go out and hunt the invasive pigs, like we did today with Maddie. And that's one of the things that people don't really realize in Hawaii, is that we have a really big invasive species problem. So for me and my family, we try to eat a lot of these invasives for the health of our aina and our ecosystem. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our nearshore fisheries and why they're so important to us in Hawaii. If you can look back to the old days, our Ahupua system, or land division, fed so many people, and they didn't have to rely on imported foods or barges, and they created a system that worked from the mountains to the sea. And our people were very much a part of that food system. But unfortunately, in today's days, they are in decline. And if you talk to fishermen or any folks who are, I'm still young, but I've talked to a lot of older people, and they say that fish are not as abundant as they used to be. And so when you think about it, fisheries, they provide more than 7 million meals annually. That's a huge amount. And so for us in Hawaii, our fisheries are very important for our livelihoods, our economies. And so one of the questions I always ask is, how do we continue that for the future? And how do we make sure our nearshore fisheries can sustain ourselves for the future generations? So some of the things that we have as challenges with managing our nearshore fisheries, there's many, but I'm going to focus on 3 tonight. So the first one is that 75% of our coastal fisheries are depleted. And actually, there's about 1% of historical catch that's caught compared to before. And so that's something that will change, and we want to work with different partners to help change that. Also, as you guys know, more than 90% of all of our food in Hawaii is imported. And about 50, yeah, of all of our food is imported in Hawaii. And about 50% of our seafood is imported. So what that means for Hawaii is that compared to all of our food that's imported, we're doing pretty good in terms of being able to rely on seafood locally, but it could be better. And then lastly, there's about 1% of our state budget that's allocated toward natural resource management. And so from a funding perspective, it's really not that much. And I think with these three issues, looking at our nearshore fisheries holistically, we have to kind of understand this system of challenges that we're dealing with. So like I said, one of the questions I always ask myself and our team is, how do we ensure our fisheries can continue to feed Hawaii into the future? From a global food systems perspective, seafood supply chains are very complex, and a lot of times, especially with larger fisheries, it passes through many hands and many businesses before it gets from ocean to plate. It's not a fisherman pulling it up and going straight to a restaurant like most people believe. In fact, it's much more complex and almost mind-boggling at times when you think about how all the fisheries that are moving across the globe into different markets.
Would you define our fisheries? I mean, like how far from the coast? Because I don't have too much idea how big of the area we're talking about.
To be honest, I think all of our fisheries are global, so everything's related. Our oceans should be viewed as one, but in terms of our fisheries that continue to feed Hawaii, a lot of our fisheries come from the longline tuna auction, as well as nearshore fisheries. So
The graph that you had, it said oceanscape. Is that the area that we fish, or?
yeah, fish are being fished all over the world. Yes. And so going back to my point about being able to feed Hawaii into the future, we have to also consider our local demand and also our visitor demand. It's expected that we'll have around 10 million tourists coming into Hawaii. And so in terms of our local food security, being able to feed visitors is something that we all have to think about. How do we do those things? So let's take a trip to the local fish market. Who here goes to buy fish? Who goes to the fish market? So one of the things that's popular in Hawaii, as you guys know, is poke, right? A lot of people in Hawaii eat poke, and a lot of people, that trend has also transitioned to the mainland, and even in London. It's crazy, overseas. With poke, for example, you're standing in line at the poke bar and you're deciding what kind of food you want, and you're looking down at the prices, and for me, I don't know where that fish is coming from, or how it was caught, and when it was caught. And a lot of times with the poke bar, different fish, so it's really hard as a consumer to know exactly where that fish is coming from unless it has traceability or labels on that fish. In Hawaii, we've been really good with this farm-to-table movement, so we know where our Manoa butter lettuce comes from. We know Waimanalo greens, but in terms of seafood, it's a lot. There's a lot more questions, and there's a lot more unknowns when it comes to tracking down just where your seafood comes from. Let's see. And this is a picture. Oh, this is a picture of limu ahi poke, $16.95 a pound. Sometimes you can tell where the fish is coming from, but by the price. For example, this might have been locally caught, but it's unknown. And at best, you get the country of origin if it's imported. Sometimes markets will tell you if it's carbon monoxide treated, which is another issue. But like I said, I think looking toward the future of how our fish and consumers interact with buying seafood, I think labeling has to be improved.
What market is this from?
This was at Alicia's Market.
Where?
Alicia's Market.
Alicia's. Where's that?
It's in Kalihi, and I think they burnt the restaurant. Actually, burned down.
Okay, part though I heard.
Oh, they did? Awesome. So going back to talking about consumers and seafood, I wanted to share some insights from a 2018 seafood consumer survey that was done last year. And I guess raise your hand if you agree with these. So 70% of seafood consumers say that they would like to hear more from companies about the sustainability of their seafood. Who agrees with that? I do. Pollution and overfishing are consistently the most concerning ocean issues. People agree with that? 72% agree that in order to save the oceans, we need to consume seafood from sustainable sources. An increasing number believe that people should be prepared to switch to another type if it's more sustainable. And the last one is cut off, but it says 83% agree that we need to protect seafood.
What kind of fish would they eat?
This is just in general.
Just in general.
Yeah, this survey was done globally across 22 countries. And the last one is 83% agree that we need to protect seafood for future generations. That's something that hits home for me.
Sustainable. Are you talking about farm-raised fish? That's what your definition would be? So there's many definitions of sustainable, and there's a lot of aquaculture that helps to bring more seafood into the marketplace that is sustainable. And like I said, I think it all comes down to knowing what their practices are and how they raise fish. Definitely comes into the conversation. So, knowing that consumers are demanding more information about their seafood, one of the initiatives that we did at Conservation International Hawaii was to put on a Hawaii Seafood Month campaign that we did. And this was actually 3 years ago already. And this campaign was a statewide campaign that brought together about 50 restaurants, businesses, fishing communities, all together to really start what is sustainable seafood? How do we eat more local seafood? And how can we all work together to ensure that we can have fish for future generations? For Hawaii, and especially in the cuisine in Hawaii, seafood's such an important part in eating. And I say, like, many tourists that come to Hawaii, they expect to eat seafood when they come here because at the time they're coming from landlocked areas and they haven't tasted fresh seafood. So for the industry, the fishing communities, and chefs to come together all to share different recipes and share conversations around the sustainability of seafood, that was a really important project that we did. And it really created more of a relationship between industries that don't really talk to each other all the time. And so that was big for us. And so this is a photo with some of the chefs that were involved in our launch events. That in the corner over there is from a newspaper article. posing next to fresh caught seafood, and one of the dishes that was made during this campaign. And the other point that I wanted to make is that the reason why we did this campaign was because we saw that chefs, like conservation organizations alone, can't protect our oceans single-handedly. It's going to require the efforts of multiple partners and organizations and industry. And with this campaign, it really showed that chefs really did care. They really wanted to serve something that felt good and was local. And also with, like I said, with consumers demanding more information, they wanted to learn more about how to provide more information about their seafood that they were serving. And so we really see them as the solution to sustainable seafood. And one of the ways we did this in this campaign, stability codes on all of the seafood. We actually traced 1,000 pounds of seafood in 1 month for 27 different species that was caught locally in Hawaii. And one of the reasons why we did this was to help change the conversation and shape people's perception around seafood. Like I said before, a lot of times you go and buy seafood, people don't know where it came from or who caught it. But with technology these days, we can actually work along the supply chain to get that information and get those key data elements that are a lot of the places where you buy seafood, and we attach them to the food in all of these restaurants and retails. We participated in this campaign.
It's Honolulu.
Yes.
What is that?
So, can you guys see this screen?
Art.
It's a little blurry, but this is an example of one of the trace codes that we provided during this campaign. So, for example, we have this event at my MW restaurant, sustainably traditionally raised hotel and mackerel shad. And if you can see from the dish, you can't really tell it is. And so we provided these traceability codes on the menu, and people could learn about what the fish was and who caught it. So if you can see in the second column, Kukulu was the fisherman who caught it. And you could learn how it was caught, and it was caught from a hoop net fishery. And so the idea with providing more information to consumers is that people will become more educated and can make better decisions about.
So he's a fisherman.
Yeah.
Where?
Is there any stores, any market in Oahu where you can identify who caught the fish and where does that exist?
So one of the projects that I also worked on with Conservation International was to create Hawaii's first local community. It's a community-supported fishery, and it's called Local IA. And Local IA sources from dayboat commercial fishermen around Oahu, and they put trace codes and they embed this consumer education component to all of the fish that they provide.
So where does he fish?
So in this particular case, Kukulu is from Honolulu.
Really? Oh, okay.
And so, like I said, I think for me, understanding where my food comes from is very important. And so with this technology, we're trying to instill that conversation that people know exactly where their food's coming from. And you can get that down to what the fish was, who caught it, and where it was caught, and why that fish is.
When I was younger, I went to Honolulu and spent a lot of time there. And boy, they caught a lot of fish. Now we ate a lot of it because that's what they caught.
Yeah, Aupelu is actually the second most valuable commercial fishery in Hawaii.
My first question, when you're finding a fish in a market that identifies the fish and the fishermen and all of that, is there a premium price that you're paying for that versus what you buy fish for in a regular market?
So in terms of local IA, the seafood support fishery I was talking about, they sell directly to consumers through a monthly fish box. So if you know a CSA or community supported agriculture model, they do it with fish. And so you're paying about $25 for 1.5 to 2 pounds of seafood, whatever's in season. And so depending on the season, you may pay more.
And what would the cost be in a Costco?
It's probably cheaper, but it's also probably for local.
Go to Papasio market.
Yeah, I go to Tamashio's all the time. Yeah, so this is, just to wrap up this slide, this was one of the examples that we had, and people could access this information through QR codes or through menus. We also trained the restaurant people to talk about where their fish is coming from, because most restaurant staff, if you ask them, they won't know where their fish is coming from. So one of the important conversations that we had with restaurants during this campaign was to really have that as a talking point when they were serving dishes out to customers.
Fresh fish.
What was that?
Fresh fish. Freshwater fish.
Yes, there are. We only focus on wild caught fish though for this campaign.
100% fresh fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have fresh like lakes, but unfortunately, we focused on wild caught ocean fish. And so I hope you guys can see this better. This is a better slide of the one before. And every fish had a trace code. So if you can see, this is a different one. This is on Akule with fisherman Carl Okamoto, caught pelagic in line. It shows you where he caught the fish and how that fishery, how he caught the fish. Another interesting component is that consumers could actually thank their fishermen. So they could write them messages and say, oh, I had your fish at Mud and Water restaurant. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for spending your time to catch this fish. And so that's something new that not many people are used to doing, and having that relationship directly to the food producer. And so we wanted to create that relationship that way. And so after this campaign that we did 3 years ago, it really opened the doors for us to work with different seafood businesses and wholesalers in the state. And most recently, we're working with Suisan Company, which is a seafood wholesaler in Hilo, major seafood distributors in Hawaii, mostly focusing on Hawaii Island. But we're working on them currently with a seafood traceability project so that they can improve their internal traceability, reducing waste, and also having a better internal operation system that ultimately helps their fisheries. And so this campaign and the way that we approach working with different partners is not something new. Conservation International, like I said, works globally, and there's 2 different programs that I really enjoyed learning from recently. And there's one program in Colombia called the Eco Gourmet Program, and another one in Brazil called the Pesca Mais Sustentavo Program.
When I start using the S instead of the Z.
I think that's the way they spell it in Brazil.
Oh, and we spell it the Z.
I think so. If it's a typo, I apologize. Anyway, these 2, Colombia and Brazil, their goals are to help small-scale fishermen and their livelihoods with high-end restaurants, telling the story from cook to plate. And the theory behind these programs, like I said, instill a culture of knowing where your food is coming and how that benefits both the fishing communities, our oceans, and also our economies and our restaurant industries. And I think that culture of working together across industries is something that that CI is working to do in other countries as well.
What does that What does that mean?
What was that?
What does that line mean? That's Maya sustainable.
So that is sustainable fishing.
What?
Sustainable fishing in Portuguese. And also, we're also seeing more sustainable seafood initiatives popping up around the world. In the US, there's many. There's Sustainable Seafood Week. There's in Japan, chefs are getting together with journalists, with scientists, with different industries, along the same lines that we did, to really get together around finding these solutions on how do we eat more sustainably, how do we eat with the oceans in mind. And for them, their motivation was the Tokyo Olympics coming up in 2020. And it's really inspiring to see them trying to work together to make sure that when people come to Tokyo in 2020, they can be able to serve seafood that is sustainable. We're also seeing in the Philippines, for example, they had their Sustainable Seafood Week as well. And so there's all these different initiatives around the world that are trying to work across sectors to bring sustainable seafood to market. Sorry, the formatting is messed up because of my Mac. But this is actually the fish that you ate tonight. And this is one of the invasive species that we have, called the ta'ape, or the blue line snapper. And they're very prolific in Hawaii, and I actually asked Mahealani if Hanauma Bay had a lot of ta'ape, and she said yes, there's a lot of ta'ape out in Hanauma Bay. And shifting gears from our initiatives with Hawaii Seafood Month, starting up local IA, and kind of working in this space where it brings a lot of parties together. We're thinking, what's a local seafood that can be eaten? How do we bring that more to market? And so we thought, why don't we eat our two invasive species, the ta'ape and the to'au? I didn't have a picture of to'au, but that's also another one of our invasives. And the ta'ape and to'au have actually been introduced to Hawaii in the 1950s, DLNR, as food fish. So it was intentionally brought to Hawaii. The populations expanded, not just from Oahu, but statewide, and actually out to Papahanaumokuakea. So the populations have expanded throughout the archipelago. And so one of the ways that we see a solution to this invasive problem is to eat them. And I think it's a simple and delicious solution to doing so. The problem is that a lot of fishermen don't want to catch it because it has a low market price. And so when I went to Tamashiro's,
I've never seen that.
At Tamashiro,
Really?
I've actually never seen a lot less common. But when I went to Tamashiro's, I bought the ape for $2.95 a pound, which is pretty cheap. So if you think about what the fishermen are getting for that, it's probably $1, maybe $2 max. So the incentive for fishermen to actually go out and catch these is pretty low because of the low market value. And so our idea is to bring chefs together and to create more of a demand for eating these invasive species and creating more of an appetite for them. And incentivize fishermen and fishers to target them. If you can see in this photo, I got it from the internet, but it's actually from a charter fishing boat in Molokai, and he actually goes and targets them. But it's not very common for you to see fishers to go and target ta'ape specifically. A lot of people go and bottom fish, and they'll catch them up as bycatch and sell them to the market. And so our goal is to kind of raise the awareness around eating these type of species.
What is this bottom fish?
It's near shore and bottom. And hopefully you guys took some of the fish dip and thought it was, I think for myself, I think ta'api is a pretty good fish. I think ta'al's a pretty good fish too. So I think there's a good chance in bringing chefs to really innovate different recipes to cook this fish. And I think moving forward, we have to be more creative in the ways that we approach our seafood. And by creating chefs networks or creating a hui of chefs to be able to create solutions around innovating recipes, it'll help our ocean ultimately. And so, yeah. No, that's a papio. Yeah. So looking forward, like I said, I think is that we were really interested in at CI is changing the way we talk about sustainable seafood and how we eat. That's one of the important things to me and what I'm hoping to get out of these sustainable seafood initiatives. I think together, like I said, we're not going to be able to do this alone. So going with the theme of environmental resolutions, I would just encourage you to always ask where your food's coming from. Dig deeper into why that's important to you and important to your culture. And for me, it's very much eating the invasives and eating with our environment. So I encourage you folks to do the same thing. Coming. I wanted to end, I know that the formatting's kind of messed up, but I wanted to read this one quote that I really like from one of our chefs that we worked with. And this is from Chef Thailand Pang from the Fairmont Kealani in Maui. And he said, "I believe that if there are enough people in the dining room and enough people in the kitchen who care about the movement, there will always be fish for tomorrow." And I think that's kind of the culture and the movement that we're trying to work with at CI. So thank you guys for coming out.
Any questions? Yes.
Monterey Bay Aquarium. Do they still do that and publish those, you know?
Yeah, so that's referring to Seafood Watch, right? They have these little fold-out booklets that told you the red, yellow, and green varying sustainability of different species. That's one of the programs that help to inform people about how their fish, why it's sustainable, and which ones to eat and which ones to avoid. So, I think those programs are great. Those programs are great.
Yeah, that was one that used to have it for regions too, so it was kind of a regional look at that. So people are interested in that kind of metric to help explain which of them are more sustainable or less sustainable.
Yeah, definitely.
I eat a lot of fish. And so, both the fisheries the fisheries are just overfished. Fish are just scarce. So one way of attacking this is to discourage the eating of fish.
And that's actually, Mohealani doesn't eat fish. There's a lot of people who choose not to eat fish, and that's one way. That's people's choice, and I definitely see that as part of how we can all ensure that there's more fish for tomorrow. For me personally,
I mean, on a worldwide basis,
right.
the fisheries are just overfished.
Yeah. For me personally, I got into ocean conservation because my dad fished, right? And for that relationship of going out into our ocean and fishing and doing that in a responsible manner really established my relationship to the ocean and to our fisheries. And so for some people, they choose not to eat fish, but for other people, it's a livelihood and they depend on our fisheries. And so with that in mind, I think there's a balance. There's some people who eat fish and some people who don't. I think I take lua, and my kumu always tells me that one way to establish a relationship with the land is to eat from it. So, like I said, we import over 90% of our food. That means we're eating oranges from Washington, apples from Oregon, and bananas from South America. And so when you think about what we're putting into our bodies, it's all food that's been, like, for example, bananas, you have to harvest them way before they're ripe in order to ship it all the way here. And so we're getting food that's not so fresh. But what was my point? When you have local food and you're eating from the land, I think that's what establishes our relationship to this land and Aina, is by eating from it. And so that's my
also a step in the right direction.
Right, and also for food security reasons as well.
For the record, I don't eat animals. Actually, all animals. And it started when I was 3. So
Wow.
yeah, and it was a self choice. And my mom just said, "Okay, you don't want to eat it? Don't eat it." Yeah. So.
And that's important because
Yeah.
I think I agree, like with the way that animals are being raised and the way that there's monocrops, and there's definitely a lot of different sides to our food system, and being able to support the local farmers and local thing that I think is important for the future of our food
On
system.
Hawaii, my grandfather was a fisherman and made his own net. When he went fishing, whatever he caught, the fish he wanted to eat, the rest went back into the ocean.
Yeah. And that's an example of what pono fishing is. And
That's what all the fishermen should do instead of wasting.
right, exactly. And we're actually working with fishermen who are trying to revitalize their own traditional practices. And so that's also important to us as well.
Is your organization there get involved with gill nets?
Gill nets.
Gill nets?
We don't
handle that kind
we
of
don't
stuff.
impose regulations by the DLNR and JAR. And actually, Brian is in the room.
I was just going to say, there was a bill introduced into the 2019 legislative session banning all nets in the state, so if you're passionate about that subject, send in your testimony to the legislature on that hearing as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Any other questions? Yes.
So one of the most abundant invasive fish in the state is the conda or the Marquesas mullet. Have you tried out your chef skills on making that fish?
Yeah, so actually I'm involved with the Slow Foods organization, and they put on a few eat the invasive dinners, and we actually served that as one of the species in our dinners, and it was really good. So yes, I think there's a lot of potential for raising the awareness for that as well, not just to us. They steamed it, and they put this. It was almost like a plum sauce on it. It was really tasty. But I think a lot of with like that, a lot of people don't like the type the tiny bones. So that's something that I think we need to overcome with chefs and people. The conga, it's the Australian mullet, right?
Marquesian
Oh,
mullet. It looks like a juvenile mullet.
Mm-hmm.
You get to about 6-7 inches.